Let's go.
Let's go. Oh,
Do you want to?
sorry. I'll let you.
Next one.
I'm excited and I feel relaxed and I'm ready to party. Don't say sorry. You don't need to do that. You don't need to apologize. It's a fucked up female habit. You don't need to be sorry for anything ever. Can you guess what every woman's worst nightmare is? I don't have rage issues! I have nothing to prove to you. When I'm good, I'm very good. But when I'm bad, I'm better.
I say when it comes to stardom and Lauren, there are no accidents.
Hi, Karen Peterson.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Citizen Dame, the podcast where we're fine. Everything's fine. Everybody and everything is fine. It's all good. I am Lauren Humphries Brooks, probably. And with me, as always, usually at least, is Karen Peterson. Hello, Karen.
Hi.
So we're here.
For now. If you're listening to this, then we're probably still here.
I like how you did that last week too. Just like, well, I'm here. Who knows?
We're recording. As of Sunday morning, we're still here.
We're recording on Sunday morning. Yes. So we are here. Lots of exciting things have been happening. But first of all, before we get going on our
sorry. Lots of exciting things. Yes.
Many exciting things. It's can't even fathom how exciting things are right now. I'm so glad to be living in this time period.
We live in interesting times.
It really the old Chinese curse. Honestly.
Yes.
Yeah. So, Karen, how are you? Other than being totally fine, how are you?
I'm doing all right. It's kind of funny because I volunteered the Angels baseball team. They do a 5K every year, and it was yesterday, Saturday. And I volunteered for it because I couldn't run because I have a problem with my foot right now, blah, 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 whatever. It's boring. But I volunteered for it because a couple of my friends signed up to run. They backed out. They didn't go, but I still went. And so I was helping out with registration. And at one point, and where I was at was like kind of on the end of this row of tables. And so people who forgot to pick up pins to pin their bibs to their shirts were coming up to me to get pins. And anyway, so all of a sudden this man comes up to my table and I was just like, oh my gosh, it was my old therapist that I haven't seen in a long time, but it was my therapist. And I was just like, and we were both in New York at the same time too. Didn't know it until afterwards. So we didn't ever run into each other there either, but it was just like, okay, we keep like almost crossing paths. And now this is like, this feels like a sign that maybe I need to go to therapy.
Just like, look at your old therapist. I wonder why they might be around right now.
Exactly.
The universe does work in mysterious ways. There's no doubt about it.
So true. So I'm fine. I'm great.
Magnificent. Yeah. I live in the middle of the rainforest now. That's just what New York is at this moment. I think we're actually it's called like a heat dome or something like that.
I saw that on the news.
Yeah,
we're somehow out of that. I don't know why.
Yeah, it's pretty not great.
It's affecting 40 states, and California somehow is not one of them.
Yeah, it's not wonderful. It's like I'm used to, we usually have a couple of really, really hot days in the city. The humidity is what's doing it also, is that the humidity is just incredibly high, and it's going to get higher as over the next couple of days. So it's not supposed to last too long for New York City, but it's still going to be dangerous heat. So that's what we're doing. So I'm sitting here in my nicely air-conditioned apartment looking at the rainforest outside my window.
Well, I've got a couch. If you want to come visit.
I mean, I remember going to California last year and being like, oh, it's hot, but it's not like humid,
Right. It is currently 61 degrees.
See, that sounds nice. That sounds nice right now.
It is 61 degrees in California near the end of June.
That sounds so lovely.
Right? It also is very weird and confusing.
Yeah. So into this climate, in all of its many forms, we are going to carry on with our Pride Month discussion, and I am actually so fucking excited about this one because this is one of my favorite like Pride films. I think it's a fascinating film. I think no matter how you feel about it, I think it's a fascinating film. And we've talked about it a little bit before, but this is the first time we're actually going to do an entire episode on it. So we're going to discuss the film Hedwig and the Angry Inch. And this was released in 2001. It is directed by John Cameron Mitchell, who also plays the lead role of Hedwig, and the film is based on the off-Broadway stage musical written by John Cameron Mitchell and Stephen Trask, who also appears in the film and does all of the Tommy Nasset's vocals. And this is, I was actually asked the other day to summarize what this film is about. And it's sort of hard, like it's basically the life story-ish of focusing on particular sections of her life of Hedwig Robinson, a East German punk rock singer played by John Cameron Mitchell, who undergoes a forced sex change operation that is then botched and kind of puts her in this space where she's neither male nor female, but is also not transgender, is not cis, is sort of in this interesting space. And it's primarily focused, the story is primarily focused on her relationship with Tommy Speck, who becomes Tommy Nassus, and who like basically collaborates first with Hedwig and then winds up stealing all of her songs, becoming a big rock star. And so the film follows her as she's following Tommy around on his big tour, and her and her punk band are playing at Bilgewater's across the country. These like sort of Applebee's style restaurants. So this is a film, I think.
It is a film, I can confirm.
It very much is. So Karen, this is the first time you had seen Hedwig and the Angry Inch. But you said that you'd seen some like clips from some of the stage productions before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had seen clips. I remember also when Neil Patrick Harris was playing the role on Broadway, or I guess I don't know. Did it go to Broadway after?
Yeah, there's been
I remember him playing in the Tonys, singing in the Tony Awards.
There's been a number of different productions. The original stage production was in 1998, and it was an off-Broadway show starring John Cameron Mitchell. And then it's gone through a number of different productions, including the one with Neil Patrick Harris, and Alan Cumming also played Hedwig
right.
in a part. Yeah. So there've been a number of different productions of Hedwig.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was familiar with it. I knew the basics of the plot, but I had never watched the movie before, which is one that has popped up a number of times. You've talked about it a couple of times. It's just one that it's been on my radar and I've been meaning to watch. I just had never sat down to do it until we decided to include it this month. So
it's sort of one of those seminal kind of queer films because I think of what it does and what it tries to do. Whether or not it's successful at it is a question, but it's often paired with stuff like Rocky Horror, with Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, with Tu Wong Fu. It's kind of in a similar wheelhouse. So before we get going, what did you think? Like generally, what were your feelings about the film?
I have to start by saying that I was very tired when I watched it. I should have watched it earlier in the week because I feel like I wasn't in the right headspace for it. I do think that there are some things about it that are really, really fascinating. As a movie, I think that Mitchell directs something that I can understand why it's so meaningful to people. I think the musical numbers are great. I think the costumes and the makeup, all the things that make up a movie, I think are really, really well done. Where I struggled with it and why I do intend to give this another shot sometime in the near future I really struggled with the character of Hedwig specifically. And I found them, I'm not sure what the right pronoun is, pretty insufferable to the point that it was hard for me to watch sometimes because I was just like, I'm just bothered by you.
Well, I do think so. That's an interesting point. I think that usually Hedwig is referred to as she.
Yeah.
But Hedwig's, I think we should talk about in a minute, let's talk about like how we classify Hedwig, because John Cameron Mitchell has also talked about this. And Hedwig is being sort of this middle figure, right? Split figure, literally. But so I think that you're right, actually. Like I absolutely understand the feeling about that, because I don't think that there's, for a good bit of the film, Hedwig is not likable necessarily. Like we kind of, I think we come to understand her, we're asked to understand her, but we're not necessarily asked to like her, right? If that makes sense. There's a sense of sympathy and maybe of empathy with what she goes through. But she does behave badly. She does behave in really off-putting ways.
Toxic sometimes.
Yeah, toxic, violent, mean. And I think that some of it is, I think that the way that the film frames it, the way that the story frames it, is that a lot of this is a result of her speaking for something that outside of herself that she can actually only find within herself. And I think that that's where multiple viewings do actually come into play. Because the first viewing of the film, I think, can be quite overwhelming. And particularly, like, you get kind of dropped into the middle of it. There's a lot of music, first of all. The whole thing is sort of structured as this kind of Hedwig giving a live performance of her life story, right? And sort of telling the story of what happened to her via these different songs, and then via this whole thing about her following Tommy around. But that's the thing, she's obsessive. Like, she gets obsessed with this boy, basically, who has stolen from her, who has taken the songs that she's written and kind of discarded her. And then we also get all of this information about her backstory, about, you know, how she became Hedwig. And all of that. And that's all sort of folded into both her narrative, her telling the story, as well as the songs, as well as what we're watching on the screen. So there's a lot of different things happening. So I think as a result, it can become very overwhelming and difficult to follow, even like, okay, what is actually happening here? How are we meant to understand this? And then the more that you watch it and the more that you experience it, the more I think you come to understand what the film is actually trying to do. And whether or not it's successful at it, I think is debatable, but it is about this discovery of self, I think, and the separation of self. And one of the major elements to that is the song The Origin of Love, which is sort of taking this Platonic concept of human beings as being split down the middle, essentially, and that the pursuit of love is trying to find your other half, trying to find the other part of your soul, the other part of your humanity that is going to complete you. And that's the way that Hedwig understands her life and her pursuit. And that's not actually what she or what any of us really need. And that's kind of the argument of the film. And it's all wrapped up in these issues of gender and sexuality as well.
Yeah. I will say that as the film goes on, as you learn more about Hedwig, as Hedwig starts to really, I guess, understand herself more, as things progress, I did start to settle into it more. Like by the end, I was just like, okay, all right, I think that this, not that it redeems itself because it didn't need to, but I felt like I kind of came around to it more than I felt in the first probably half of the movie. So,
well, it's yeah, I think that it does kind of introduce you to this figure who's very brash, is very intense, is very like volatile in a lot of ways. Like she shifts not personality, but she shifts mood a lot very quickly. And we sort of begin to realize as you watch the film, it's like, that's why. That makes sense, right? And And so let's talk about this issue of gender, because John Cameron Mitchell himself has talked about Hedwig is like, because there's been this conversation, particularly is like, is Hedwig transgender, or is meant to be representative of a transgender person? And John Cameron Mitchell has more or less said no, right? Hedwig is not transgender because of the nature of what happens, right? Which is that Hedwig is born Hansel, a boy in East Germany. He eventually has a relationship with an American serviceman, and in order to get out of East Germany, he undergoes sex reassignment surgery. So there's never this impression that Hedwig thinks of herself, or that Hansel thinks of himself as female, right? It's not like that this is more coming into like trying to become or be transgender, right? It's more, it's forced. Like, it's like, this is something you have to do in order to survive, essentially, in order to have the things that you want. And what happens is, and there's an entire song about it, but what happens is that the sex change operation goes wrong, and effectively leaves Hedwig with the angry inch, right? With like, so Hedwig acts as this sort of this split, kind of occupying this, you know, if you're considering the gender binary, occupying this space in between male and female that is neither one nor the other, but is also not trans, is also not cis, is like this other gender, and not intersex, not like there's it's very hard to define what Hedwig is, right? And how Hedwig experiences the world, because she refers to herself as she, and most of the film she's referred to as she. But she's neither, essentially. She's not any. And that's part of the pursuit of identity, is this notion of being split and trying to find the thing that will make you whole. So,
yes. I was trying to think like how to, yes. And I think that that's one of the things that's very interesting about the film, is the fact that as we are trying to, you know, make sense of Hedwig's journey, so is she. She's trying to, I mean, she's basically doing these series of performances and you know, songs, but also some spoken word as she's talking at her audience, who could not care less in a lot of cases, and just telling her story while she's trying to basically figure that out about herself. Like, she doesn't know who she is, how she fits into the world, because so much of her identity was decided for her and not by her. And I think, and some of the off-putting parts of her personality, I think, really are sort of a sort of because of that, you know, because she doesn't know who she is, because she's so unsettled and searching for things, and she doesn't even quite know what she's searching for. And so that just causes so much anxiety and so many, you know, just so many negative emotions in her, that it causes her to lash out and treat other people really badly, especially people who don't deserve it, like the ones who deserve it the least. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's I think it's really interesting, some of the ways that Mitchell represents Hedwig's experiences. For example, I think the whole thing, like, we understand what's at stake to get her out of East Germany, for example, because, you know, the Iron Curtain's there, the actual Berlin Wall exists at this point. This is before the fall. And she meets this person, and she, you know, it's that young love thing. You're just like kind of in a whirlwind. Oh, okay. Oh, I have to go and have this surgery and leave the country so that we can be together. Okay. But then you fast forward a year, and he's leaving her for some other guy, and the Berlin Wall is falling down. And so all of this was for nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that seeing that and the way that that's done, it just really kind of adds to this complete lack of balance and complete lack of control that Hedwig has ever had over her own life. And
Yeah.
so for that, it's like, okay, I understand to some degree why she is the way that she is. It's just hard for me to connect with her.
Well, and I think that that's one of the things. So very early in the film, Hedwig's mother says, you know, absolute power corrupts absolutely, right? Talking about at one point, Hansel says like, "Oh, Jesus died for our sins," and his mother says, "So did Hitler."
Yeah.
And but there's this whole like idea that it absolute power corrupts absolutely, right? So but she follows it up with better to be powerless and not to have that. And so essentially what we get is Hedwig on the one hand completely rendering themselves powerless, right? Followed by wanting to obtain power and actually gaining power over a lot of other people. And then that's essentially corrupting her in the same way. I just keep on wanting to say them. Hansel, Hedwig, like, yes. But I think that that's one of the interesting elements into that is that, yeah, Hedwig is effectively powerless in a good bit of her story. And then she gains a degree of power over other people in forming this band and becoming this performer. You know, but the problem is that she's using it not really to benefit herself in a lot of ways, not to benefit anyone else, but to pursue her anger at Tommy. And to pursue this sense that he has stolen something from her, which he has on the one hand, but as members of her group continue to repeat, like, why don't you write a new song? Why don't you do something new? Why are you continuing to pursue this kind of circular vendetta and anger when you could actually be creating something new? And that's part of what's going on in the story. So she's repeating these patterns and repeating her story, right, as a way of taking control over it, but if it's effectively trapping her as well.
Yeah. I don't have anything to add there.
So I'll just say, like, I've seen this film a number of times. It is like, I'm sorry that you didn't connect to it. Because I'm like, I love this film. I think that this is brilliant. This is one of, like, this and Rocky Horror are two of my favorites. Though at the same time, I do understand what you're saying, because I had a similar reaction the first time I saw it, but I connected to the music so intensely. That I think that kind of carried me over some of that gap a little bit. But so one of the things that I noticed this time around, and I think that anyone who's watching this film, turn on the subtitles so that you can actually look at the lyrics for some of the songs, because they do wind up being quite important. But one of the things that I liked is very early on, there's a lyric that's there ain't that much of a difference between a bridge and a wall. Without me in the middle, you wouldn't be nothing at all. And it's Hedwig effectively describing her experience, right? Of it's being both and either or, and bridging this gap between the two selves, which is then sort of reflected again in The Origin of Love. So the male female lover hater, the musical and the rock concert, the boy and the girl, etc. So you've got this idea of being the same thing and two different things being different depending upon how you look at them. So if you look at a wall, it's a wall, but if you look at it from the top, it's actually a bridge. And I just liked that. I liked that connectivity and that notion that carries through the entire film, that is about this pursuit of wholeness and this pursuit of self-knowledge and self-understanding, which ultimately culminates in, Hedwig's effective rebirth and kind of acceptance of who Hedwig is, whatever that actually represents. And yeah, I really liked that, and I think that that's that's one of the ways that this film, I think, is trying to sort of understand both the anger and the resistance, as well as the sorrow and the joy of the queer experience. It's all of those different things, if that makes any sense to you.
It does. No, it does make sense. And I mean, I wish that I had taken some notes while I was watching. I was trying to, I mean, I think you talked about this last week where, the first time you're watching something, you try to just enjoy. Maybe we were talking about this offline. I don't know. But yeah, I don't tend to take notes the first time I'm watching something unless I know I'm going to be writing a review about it. So in this case, I didn't. And I kind of wish I had, because some of the songs really, I really did like the music a lot. And some of the songs just had some powerful lyrics that I think those are kind of the key to unlocking the story so much more than anything that Hedwig is doing or telling us about off stage. I feel like that's really where the emotional connection is through the music, which is great. And in a musical, that's kind of what you want. But I don't have a specific example to pull from right now. I apologize.
Yeah, the songs act like, I think we may have talked before about the way that musicals work. You've got like stage musicals, you've got stuff like this that are it's interesting because you've got like actual musical performances. You've got Hedwig and her band in concert, right?
Yeah.
And actually I guess that most of those songs were recorded live, so that they actually performed the songs versus overdubbing them later, because they wanted to have, within the context of the film, that experience of the stage performance, of actually being at a rock concert or watching a music video essentially. And I don't know where I was going with that, but so the songs do drive the narrative forward, and they're expressive of Hedwig's internal experiences, which I think is part of, also explains her obsession with Tommy Gnossos, who steals them, right? And if you're watching, if you listen, we get some of his songs, like him performing her songs, basically. And if you pay attention to that, it's like that does not have the same resonance. Singing those lyrics about being a bridge in a wall has a very different experience from seeing a cisgender white man singing that versus Hedwig.
Mm-hmm.
And the meaning that is underlying that. And at one point, Hedwig actually takes him to task for not even knowing what he was talking about. So singing about the god Cyrus. And she's like, it's not Cyrus, it's Osiris. It's an Egyptian god, you idiot. But it's that thing of not understanding the meaning underlying the lyrics. And part of what is happening within the film is that the lyrics are actually driving the narrative forward. They're giving us information about the characters, and giving us information about Hedwig's internal experience that is incredibly important. I think in view of the queerness of it, is that's this, in a weird way, this is a very internal musical. It's very much about a certain type of queer experience, of that sense of being the divided self, of presenting one face to the world and being something else underneath. And it's an interesting space, given that Hedwig, even as we're talking about her, we can't do is she, he, they. How are we going to talk about her? We can't even put pronouns to her, because that's not even the way that she defines herself, because she doesn't even know how to define herself.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Well, and because I did read a little bit of what other people thought. Because I just, when I finished the movie last night, I was just like, I know people love this, I'm just not feeling that, so I was just looking for, not validation for my opinion, but I was just looking for what other people's thoughts were. And I came across some really interesting, and one of the things that I love about movies and about talking about movies with good, smart people, such as yourself, um, is how no, like any movie can garner some like really interesting conversation, and you can have a lot of very smart people that just see things completely differently. And so it was interesting reading people's thoughts about this, like from across like trans writers, um, people that are not at all in like don't consider themselves at all part of LGBTQ community. Um, just like this really interesting swath of people talking about their experiences. But one of the things that a lot of people agreed on was um not confusion. That's not the right word, but just like by the end of the movie, where now Hedwig is back to um a, like appearing more masculine, taking off the wigs and not wearing feminine clothes, at the by the end. And just there's just this very okay, so what are we left to understand about Hedwig by the end? Has she accepted, like, to me it felt like she's accepted that she is kind of both sides of
Yeah.
this, and that has made her whole, and not that she's going back to who she was, but she's become a different, like a different sort of more evolved version of herself.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's interesting that there's so many different different views of that ending. So
Well, and I think that that's, it's interesting. So thinking about even back to the first time that I watched it, because I didn't like the ending the first time I watched it. I was like, well, that's not that there is the sense of like, well, are we just going to discard the queerness of it, right? But at the same time, being female is not something that Hedwig actually is. But Hedwig
right.
is also not male, and is not trans, right?
Right.
So that definition of those genders, like the gender definitions, the gender boxes that we tick, is something that cannot apply to Hedwig.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't even, so Hedwig is a name that she gives herself. The name she was given was Hansel. Hedwig itself is a female name. But you do it then kind of opens the question. It's like, okay, so she's given that to her stage persona, right? Hedwig and the Angry Inch. Who is she to herself? And I think that that's what a lot of the film is actually, that's exactly what they're exploring. And I do think that at the end, you have that moment, and if you look at the appearance of the tattoo, with the two halves of the face, which comes from then we get the animation of The Origin of Love. And then at the end of the film, the face is made whole. The tattoo literally fuses itself together into this, and it's an androgynous face. It's neither male nor female. You can't put a gender onto the face, right? And I think that honestly, whether or not you agree that it works completely, I think that that is what the film and the story is going for, is that concept of wholeness, of not putting yourself, not defining yourself within a box, of saying like, okay, we're gonna check off the gender marker, right? And that there's a transcendence there. And I do think that part of the point of Hedwig effectively removing her clothes by the end, like literally is naked by the end of the film, is that sort of a attempt at, like, to say, if we're going to completely shear off everything, like all of the performance, the wigs, all of the different gender markers, this is simply this body, right? This human body that does not have a definition that we can easily put into words. And that's where it comes into this concept of transcendence and wholeness. That's my reading of it.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense.
And and I think that the ending is really interesting because you get Yitzhak,
Yeah.
who's been longing, who is a female actress, Miriam Shore, playing a apparently male character who is longing for the wig, like Hedwig's wig, very much wants the gender, right? And you get kind of Hedwig handing that over. And that's one of those interesting points where it's like, I think that part of it is honestly about your own self-definition and what yourself looks like to you. And so and that can be with a beard, without a beard, with a wig, without a wig, completely feminine, completely masculine, you know, all of these different permutations that we have of gender. But that ultimately gender you don't necessarily need to have that definition. And in the midst of that, you have the initial song between where Tommy Nossis performs a kind of a reprise, but with different lyrics of Wicked Little Town, talking about, you know, I was just a boy, but you were so much more. And then Hedwig finally doing the Midnight Radio song, which is a new song and is not something that Tommy Gnosis has covered or intends to cover. And that's the point at which there's a lyric within that is know that you're whole. And that there's this like gap that is being bridged effectively. And then you finally get the ending with the unification of the tattoo that is, you know, representative of this unification of the two halves of the self.
Yeah. I think what's interesting is, I mean, we see Hedwig, like I was saying, being pretty toxic to people, especially Yitzhak. And I think it's interesting because she's not someone who is going to apologize directly for her actions, but through action, she kind of does. And so when I feel like she, in her own way, is trying to make amends as she leaves and, you know, walks off. I feel like that's part of her journey of reclaiming her whole self is kind of trying to smooth things over, but in the only way that she knows how to do that. And so I feel like the ending does become kind of satisfying in that way.
Yeah, I think that, you know, in some ways, I think that this film is more of almost a allegorical treatise than it is a real, like a story.
Oh, yeah.
Like it's intended, there's a fabula to it, right?
Yeah, you can't take most of it literally.
Yeah, exactly. And so it is this extreme, you know, it's very queer. It's got all of these elements of sexuality and of gender and of the bending of those sexualities and genders and the performativity of it. In addition to, like, you know, the music itself, the fact that this entire thing is a performance. And yeah, I do think at the end that it's about, you know, that sense of imprisonment, right? So you're imprisoned within the gender that you are assigned, the gender that you were born with, the gender that other people assign to you based upon your appearance. And that what we get with Yitzhak at the end is this kind of Hedwig sort of handing that power over, right?
Yeah. That
Hedwig is letting go of the power that they have tried to have over other people and effectively offering the gender identity that Yitzhak wants, right? And so she wants the wig. She wants the dresses and the spangles. She wants to be that. And that's what she becomes. And it's similar in that sense to Hedwig is kind of letting go of all of those performances and becoming who she is, whatever that really looks like. And ultimately it is this genderless or other gender element that, you know, if like ends with her kind of walking down this alley. We never see, you know, we never get that like, oh, we're going to get a full frontal nudity or anything like that. It isn't that kind of understanding of gender. There's something beyond the gender, in other words.
Yeah.
I'm also speaking of someone who's currently reading Judith Butler's latest book.
Let's talk about that. Tell us more.
This is called What is Gender? Or no, Who's Afraid of Gender? Her first book was What is Gender? This is Who's Afraid of Gender? This is much like this has nothing. This is not directly influential on Hedwig in any sense, but it is interesting because effectively Butler is making an argument that the concept of anti-gender ideology, right? So the concept of gender itself is a phantasmic concept. Is something that has become a signifier that means a whole bunch of different things to a whole bunch of different people, and is effectively in the context of what she's talking about. She's talking about turfism, the right wing's particular fear of what gender is and what gender looks like, the concept of outlawing the teaching of gender. And which is essentially what they're doing. We won't have any books on gender in our schools, that kind of thing. And so she's talking about this as a kind of immutable concept, of something that is fluid, but that fluidity in itself is incredibly dangerous to a patriarchal white supremacist society. And that's part of the argument of the anti-gender ideology movement, this whole concept that you can have an ideological basis for gender. And I do think that I'm simplifying massively here. But I do think that there is that element that is running throughout Hedwig, is that it's this exploration of gender. So how do we talk about someone like Hedwig, who is all and nothing kind of thing? So that point of split, that looking at a wall and realizing that it's also a bridge, and that they're both at the same time. And that's something that I think we're all struggling with that right now, in particular, because of both the kind of advances that have been made in the understanding of gender, but also the attempts of totalitarian governments, of authoritarians, of the church, and I say that in a very broad sense, but of religion, to kind of repackage and sort of force people back into these binaries that are and those binaries are ultimately antithetical to freedom, and to the freedom of the individual and the freedom of self-definition. I said a lot there, sorry.
No, why are you sorry?
And that's not just like, so what do you think about that, Karen?
Sounds good. I don't know.
Sounds good. What?
I'm just kidding.
Well, but I mean, so we love saying things like, "Oh, gender is a construct," right? Just like, okay, yeah, it is. But then also, it is a construct that we can, like, even when we are talking about gender as being a construct, we are constructing gender.
Okay, that just broke my brain a little.
It's but that's the concept of ideology itself. Like, as soon as you begin talking about it, you are trying to put words to something that is wordless, and so you're constructing it as something else. So if we're saying gender is a construct, then if I identify, or I call myself a man, or I call myself a woman, I'm buying into, at some level, the construction of gender. I'm constructing my own gender. And I think that in the context of something like Hedwig is transcending the construction of gender.
Yes. That yes, I agree. I think that's the point.
Yes, definitely, 100%. I think that the point, maybe the point here is that it is also not superior necessarily. It's not like Hedwig can choose to be male or female, right? And so Yitzhak can choose to be male or female, can choose how they want to present themselves for the world. And in fact, there's a point, one of my favorite songs in the film is Wig in a Box, which is where Hedwig finally gets the wig, right?
Yeah.
That transform, and that's an important part of her journey. That's an important part of her freedom, of her finding herself. So putting on that wig is not a bad thing. It's something that frees her, but then it also winds up imprisoning her. So you have this movement of continuous self-definition and redefinition that turns into this dialogue about power and about freedom and what you are ultimately becoming. It's too early for you, Karen.
I'm feeling very ill prepared for this conversation.
I'm sorry. I've been reading this book and then I watched the movie. I was like, oh my God.
No, don't be sorry. I mean, first of all, it's my fault for waiting until yesterday to watch it. I should have watched it a few days ago, so I'd have time to think about it a little bit more, to to read a little bit more. And that's why I really do feel unprepared for this. It's also the first time I've seen it, so this is a movie that I think is really difficult to fully digest and unpack in one viewing. I think that this is like, I think that because it really does get into a lot of philosophy, a lot of mythology, and all sorts of, and psychology, like all the ologies. It gets into a lot of that, and I think trying to just soak all of that in and have a meaningful conversation about it just on one viewing, basically 12 hours ago, it's and that's like that's it's difficult.
It's hard to do. No, I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
I will say, yes, this is I own the Blu-ray of this. Like, this is probably the sixth or seventh time I've seen this film. And I actually, one of the fun things is several years ago, actually right before the pandemic really hit, I got to see Stephen Trask and John Cameron Mitchell in a performance of sort of, it's not really a performance of Hedwig, but it's a performance of the songs of Hedwig at Town Hall in New York. And it was really interesting because John Cameron Mitchell then told stories basically about like kind of how the two of them met, how they became friends, how, like, where Hedwig came from and everything. And so he had a lot of interesting things to say about it, including this whole issue of transgender identity. And, as we were saying last week when we were talking about Priscilla, the way that those words have kind of changed, because this is a film that's released in 2001, right? And we're talking about it now, what is this now, 23, 24 years later?
Yeah.
And the understanding of gender in itself has changed. The progression of gender politics and of transgender conversations about transgender people, the understanding of queerness and sexuality, et cetera, has changed from what it was in 2001. So I think that some of the criticisms I've seen of Hedwig tends to be this, similar to some of the things that you're talking about, of the what does this mean at the end of, like, becoming this more masculine presenting figure. And I do think that the point there is the stripping off of performativity, but it can also be read as, becoming male again.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's important that we understand that Hedwig is not meant to represent a transgender individual.
And I think that's something that a lot of people either have chosen to disagree with or have missed, maybe. I'm not sure. But some of the comments that I was reading about the movie were from trans writers, some of whom really felt seen by the film, and some of whom really thought, I like that, I like where this is going, but this isn't really ringing true. And I am not here to dismiss anything that a trans writer would say about this movie. I'm just saying that for me, watching it, being not at all trans, watching this, I just didn't feel like it makes sense to me what you're saying, that Mitchell has said this isn't a trans story, because to me it didn't feel like one. It felt like it was trying to not subvert, but I guess go beyond that, be more expansive than that.
Yeah.
And whether it's successful in that or not is debatable, but I didn't just from my own limited perspective, I didn't feel like it was trying to be a trans narrative.
Yeah, I don't think that it is. And I think that in reading it as a trans narrative, you are going to run into problems, probably the problems
Mhm.
that people are identifying. Exactly.
Yeah,
And particularly with this whole concept of forced sex reassignment surgery.
right.
Because it's not that Hedwig is like, I am a woman trapped in a man's body or anything like that. It's, I feel that I am a woman, and so I am going to have a sex change in order for my outside to reflect my inside. There's no kind of dialogue about that. It's literally to escape East Berlin.
Right. Yeah. I should have looked this up too, but there's the line where I think you were I know you were referencing this earlier about um the other half and all that, and
Yeah.
that the line that she has where she's talking about, like, is my other half a man, is it a woman, I don't know. And I feel like that right there really sums up that this isn't this is not a binary story, and this
Mm-hmm.
is something much much bigger than that.
Yeah, it's about this whole concept of being split down the middle, right?
Yeah.
And what exists in that gap effectively,
Mhm.
and then
Yeah.
finding a way to bridge the gap
Right.
and discover wholeness. And it's doing this in a very gender specific queer context.
Yeah. And the only
Um,
way that you can achieve that wholeness is to find it yourself. It can't be something that everybody
yeah,
else tells you is who you are. It has to come from within.
yeah, and like you say, it's not going to come from the binary. It is
Right.
and I think that that's really what the film comes down to in a lot of ways, is that you're not going to achieve that wholeness via the binary, and that
Mhm.
you need to go beyond the binary,
Yeah.
which is hard to do.
Yes.
All right, so any final thoughts on Hedwig and the Angry Inch?
I do look forward to giving this another watch in probably a month or two. I'll give it some time, let it settle, and then I'll watch it again.
Give it another watch. Listen to the soundtrack as well. The soundtrack is
Oh, the
so
music is
good.
great. Yeah.
Yeah, like
The performances are really good too.
Origin of Love is one of my favorite songs. I love Midnight Radio. Yeah, it's fantastic. I will say that I guess that at one point they were asking permission to sample different performers, and they tried to get Madonna, and Madonna wouldn't even talk to them.
Wow.
And then they tried to get Cyndi Lauper, and Cyndi Lauper was like, yes, I love this absolutely 100%. And John Cameron Mitchell, at least in the performance that I saw him, it was just like, well, when I was doing this, it was, you were either a Madonna gay or you were a Cyndi Lauper gay, and I want you to guess which one I was. So yeah, so apparently also Lou Reed was very cool, because they have a couple of lyrics from Walk on the Wild Side that they had to
Mm.
get permission to use, and Lou Reed was like, use the whole song if you want to.
Wow.
So yeah, so pretty cool.
That is cool.
All right. So for next week, we're going to be doing D.E.B.S, which I have seen, and honestly, only vaguely remember. So this will be an interesting experience for both of us, Karen.
It's another one I have not seen. I will try to watch it earlier in the week.
This is not as I went into it here on Hedwig. My memory of D.E.B.S is that it is not that intense. But who knows, maybe it is and I'm just forgetting. But yeah, it'll definitely be an interesting one. It is available on the Criterion channel. Hedwig is right now rentable. It usually comes on the Criterion channel off and on, so definitely check it out. If you have not seen it, give it a shot. It is it's a fascinating film at the very least. And at the very least, you're going to enjoy the soundtrack. So
Yeah. I did not dislike the movie. I just
you're like, what?
I don't even know how to describe my feelings about it right now.
Watch it in a double feature with Rocky Horror and then just be like, what? And don't
Yeah.
read any of the discourse about either film because it's an absolute mess. Again, coming back to that, please can we not judge queer media based on contemporary standards? We need to talk about it within the historical context. And yes, that even includes films that were made in 2001.
Yeah. Yep. The world looks a lot different than it did 25 years ago.
It really does. I'm coming to realize that more and more. And yet somehow is still the same. So as always.
Well, if you think about it, I mean, 1985, 25 years before that was 1960.
Shh. Don't say such things.
I'm just saying, like,
don't say such things.
25 years is actually a really long time, and the world looks very different.
Oh my God. All right. Well, as always, on that note, as always, we want to thank our wonderful and lovely patrons who include Abby, Audra, Brian, Connor, Estefania, Fernand, Heather, James, Judy, Carriata, Matt, Michelle, Monty, Nanina, Noel, Robert, Steve, and Sharon. Did I miss MK? I may have missed MK. Thank you as well. If you want to join their number, we have a patron. That's patreon.com/Citizen Dame. And there you can get bonus episodes. We are currently in the midst of our Alfred Hitchcock Presents watch, where we're watching all of the episodes that were directed by Hitchcock himself. And it's a lot of fun. And we also have our Flag Means Death series, which is another, seminal queer text. That's patreon.com/Citizen Dame. And we also have our Ko-Fi, ko-fi.com/Citizen Dame. We also have a website, that's citizendamepod.com, where you can read reviews and articles and editorials and fun stuff like that. And you can get in touch with us a multitude of ways. Our email is citizendamepod@gmail.com. And we are on Instagram and Blue Sky @CitizenDamePod and Letterboxd HQ @CitizenDame. And of course, you can get in touch with us individually. Karen, where are you?
I am on Instagram, Letterboxd, and Blue Sky @Karen M. Peterson.
And I am on Instagram and Letterboxd @LHBusiness. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to y'all later.
Bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, whether you like it or not.
Ow!
Hedwig!
Don't you know me, Kansas City? I'm the new Berlin Wall. Try and tear me down. How did some slip of a girly boy become the internationally ignored song stylist barely standing before you?
Damn, I can't believe you're not a girl.
Looks like we got some sugar daddies in the house. You could give me a cavity, honey. Now you're interested, huh?
Inch, not itch.
Intrigued? It is clear that I must find my other half. But is it a he or a she? Can two people actually become one? The dark turns and noise of this wicked little town. One day in the late mid-80s, I was in my early late 20s.
I never knew that woman before that night, and I never knew she wasn't a woman.
I've got a sweet tooth. Songs exploded out of us. We were outgrossing monster trucks in Wichita. When it comes to huge openings, a lot of people think of me. I had tried singing once, and they threw tomatoes. So after the show, I had a nice salad. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, both of you. Did you put a bra in a dryer? How many times do I have to tell you? You don't put a bra in a dryer! It warps! Okay, everybody. I put on some makeup. Suddenly I'm this punk rock star. And I ain't ever, I'm never turning back. Hey boy, take a walk on the wild side.
Hedwig and the Angry Inch!
When I think about all the people I have come upon in my travels, I have to think about the people who have come upon me.